With Jarred Kelenic set to miss at least a month and the Mariners still glued to the 500 mark with the trade deadline fast approaching, where do we stand with this team? We'll tell you coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Friday, July 21st, 2023. This is Trident Gonzalez and Colby Zato for the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts. If you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. On the show today, is Jarred Kelenic's injury the final nail in the Mariners' coffin? The Blue Jays are also coming to town tonight. We'll talk about that series a little bit. We'll also talk about the possibility of the Mariners targeting players with little to no major league experience at the deadline. But let's start with the series that is starting tonight between the Mariners and the Toronto Blue Jays at T-Mobile Park. You can catch all the action on the Mariners' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. The last time these two teams met was all the way back at the end of April at Rogers Center. The Mariners lost 2 of 3, had a come-from-behind victory in the last game of the series that I unfortunately left early. I'm just going to get out ahead of that before Colby reminds you. I'll own up to it. Yes, made a major mistake. I regret it. There we go. All right, moving on.
Interesting.
The last time the Blue Jays were in Seattle with all of their faithful in attendance, they got swept in 4 games by the Seattle Mariners at the height of the Mariners' 14-game win streak right before the All-Star break. It was a lot of fun. This series, I mean, with the way that the Mariners are playing baseball right now, Colby, not sure if it's going to go the same way, but hey, you never know with this Mariners ball club. So what's your thoughts heading into this one?
Feel like we have a good idea, but yeah, first things first, don't leave the ball game early ever. Some of us have never done that, but I guess we're just better than others.
And you had all the reason to leave Tuesday's game against the Twins, and you ended up getting rewarded for staying by getting the ball from Max Kepler.
Yeah, my boy Max Kepler, who I then gave to some kids. So sure, yeah, because I'm a good person and decent. I'm an adult who doesn't need a baseball. But anyways, so the series, it's kind of a big one, but really only if you sweep or get swept. Because at the end of the day, winning the series or losing the series only drops you down a game in the standings from this team that you're directly chasing and or gains you a game, which is better than losing it. And honestly, you just want to start winning series again anyway. So I'm not saying there's no value to just taking 2 or 3 from Toronto, but to make a serious dent this weekend, you have to sweep. So that seems unlikely. I think they got their best shot, tonight against Yusei, who's been, as we all know, up and down. You never know what Yusei Kikuchi you're going to get. And considering considering the Mariners are definitely rolling with AJ Pollock and Dylan Moore in the same lineup again. We'll see it. Well, I if I had to bet on what you say, Kikuchi, we'll see. I'd bet on the good one, but you never know how that goes. And obviously Gossman is going to be a tough customer on Saturday. And Manoah, who knows? He's been awful this year, but we know he's better than than his numbers suggest. At least raw stuff is better than that. So you never know with those guys. We'll see what happens. But it's a pretty big series. If for no other reason, you got to start turning the ship in the right direction. And that means you have to win the series. And if you want to do some serious damage, then you kind of need a sweep, which again, I don't like saying you have to sweep a team. I think that's kind of an unfair expectation, but it's kind of what you need to do to make up for that Tigers series loss, unfortunately. But this is just who the Mariners are right now. They are a painfully mediocre 500 club, and the thing about painfully mediocre teams is that they can sweep really good teams or they can get swept by really bad teams, and nothing can be that surprising. So it's a big series in that sense, but Also, unless you get swept or you sweep, you're not making significant headway in either direction towards buying or selling or towards making a playoff push or anything like that. So, you would like to at least win the series though, because then the tiebreaker is at least even. And if you can sweep the series, you have the season tiebreaker over the Blue Jays, which could come in handy since you've lost it to literally everybody else, except for Houston. So, yeah.
Colby, if you win 2 of 3, guess what their winning percentage would be on this homestand?
500.
It would be 500. Yeah.
It's pretty fitting. Yeah.
So you literally have to sweep or lose the series in order to not be 500 on this homestand, which, yeah, you know what? Just after watching this baseball team for the last 4 months, Mariners are winning 2 of 3 this series.
There you go.
Lock it in.
There you go.
Yeah.
Which means you probably have to win tonight because you guys might remember what happened to Gossman. Although
that's the game. That's the
no. They came back in the ninth, but then they blew it.
I think it was Bassett. Did Bassett start the game that they won?
Yes, Bassett. Yeah, Cal hit the grand slam, and then 8 runs later they were down 8-4, and then, well, yeah. I would say the rest, but you kind of
Taylor Trammell hit a 3-run home
That's
run.
right.
Or grand slam.
Trammell hit the grand slam. Yeah.
Grand slam.
Raleigh had the game winner. Yeah.
Yeah, it was his season debut too.
Yeah, it was the first pitch he saw of the year.
Yeah.
Things went downhill quickly after.
But
no. I think the Gossman game is the one they lost like 3-2.
Yeah, that was the Easton McGee game.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Easton McGee dueled. Like what, 6 no-hit innings or something crazy?
Yeah, and then forearm strain, and now Tommy John surgery.
Yep, out for the year. So
yeah,
great.
He quite literally gave it his all in that game.
He gave the Mariners everything he had. Hope he's doing well, because that was an impressive performance. But
yeah, hope he's recovering well.
Yeah.
So yeah. The Gossman game, though, that's going to be one where they strike out like 16 times, but 2 swings of the bat gives them like 5 runs.
I mean, you can win 2-1. Like that is an option. You know what I mean? So you just can't win, 0 to -1. So
right. Kikuchi, like I mentioned, he's still Yusei Kikuchi. He's gotten his walks under control a little bit this year. 2.78 walks per 9, I think, which is significantly better than he's been the last few years, but still, it's Yusei Kikuchi. And with that said, 7 scoreless, 2 hits, 10 strikeouts, 12 strikeouts.
I mean, that's just as Yusei Kikuchi has 4 innings, 6 runs, 4 walks, and 5 strikeouts. So
right,
that's kind of the beauty and the curse of Yusei, and Mariner fans are well aware of what Kikuchi brings to the table, and certainly, I don't root against the guy. He seems like a really good dude. But tonight, you kind of have to take advantage of this. And Kikuchi, as we all know, is very much susceptible to giving up the home run ball. So it would be nice to get on that early. But again, I can't even I can't even pretend to begin to guess how this series is going to go, because, well, you've seen them.
Yeah. Sunday, we'll see Alek Manoah. He'll be making his 3rd start since coming back from the Complex League. It was a rough start to the season for Manoah. I guess he just had too much pressure in his tires. Yada yada yada. I don't feel good about making that joke either. But it's been a mixed bag for him.
1 good start, 1 bad one.
Yeah, he threw 6 innings of 1-run ball against the Tigers in the first start, and then the second start most recently against the Padres 3 days ago, he gave up 6 or something like that. Didn't strike out
6
any.
and 4 runs or something like that.
Yeah, and I think he walked. I think he walked like 4 guys or 5 guys. Again, didn't strike anyone out. So mixed bag there. You really don't know where you're going to get out of Manoah or Kikuchi here, but if there's any offense that can make both of those guys look great, it's the Seattle Mariners.
And apparently the Tigers.
As well. Yeah. All right. So we'll see how that goes. Enough of that, though. Let's talk about just kind of where this team is right now after the Jarred Kelenic injury. We'll be going over that in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head on over to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Again, you can catch the Mariners and the Blue Jays starting tonight and over the course of the weekend on the Mariners hometown broadcast, SiriusXM via the SXM app. And before we talk about where we stand with this 2023 Mariner Ball Club the rest of the way, reminder once again that we are running arguably our biggest giveaway today. We are giving away 3 separate sets of tickets, 2 apiece, all terrace club level, for the Mariners Red Sox series at the end of this month. That's July 31st through August 2nd. Those are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday games. All you have to do to enter is subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a comment below on any of our videos posted this week and which day you want to go. And we will be picking 3 separate winners for the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday game. Again, you can take a friend with you, tell your friend to come over, subscribe, and leave a comment as well for an extra entry. Please refer to the terms and conditions in the description of this episode. All right. So yesterday, Colby, we talked all about Jarred Kelenic, what happened with him, his response when talking to the media, etc. Now it's time to talk more about what it means for this ball club as a whole. I guess the very simple question to ask you here is it Dipoto?
The issue with the Mariners right now, what makes them so maddening for a lot of fans, is that they won't decide who they are, and the American League kind of isn't forcing them to, because despite the 500 record, despite the just hopscotch with good baseball and terrible baseball, like they're only 5.5 back, and they only have 3 teams to pass. So it's just one of those things where the Mariners can't really decide if they want to jump in the pool or not, and the rest of the American League isn't making the decision for them. And so until they do, we're kind of stuck sitting here in limbo, knowing that the Mariners are, winning 10 of 13 stretch away from getting right back in these things. And we know the Mariners are talented enough to pull off one of those streaks. I mean, so it's just one of those things where, you're obviously not rooting for them to collapse here in the last, 10 days or so, but you kind of need them to go like 8-2 or something crazy like that to really know one way or the other. So you're just kind of stuck. And what's ultimately going to happen is the Mariners over their next 10 before the deadline are probably going to go 4-6 or 5-5 or 6-4. And you're just, there's not a lot there, but the back of your head, you have to allow for the possibility that this team can do what the Reds did in June or something like that, because they are talented enough to do that. They just haven't done it because they're not consistent enough. But that's always going to be in the back of your head until, they either go on the long losing streak and they lose 10 of 12, or maybe they go and they win 12 of 16 or something. So yeah, I think this team, there's too much talent to say it's over. The standings don't look great though. They're not playing that well, but you can't completely discount them because they are a better roster than their record indicates. And we just saw them go off and win 7 of 9 against 3 really good teams. So
yeah.
This team just refuses to let you off the hook one way or the other. Yeah. So it makes it really frustrating, but and annoying to watch on a night-to-night basis.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this already,
a lot
during the first segment, but yeah, also when we were trying to record this episode. I want to talk a little bit about our issues that we've had, but later on in the show. For now, I just want to talk about this real quick and just acknowledge the fact that like this team still is just one good run away from changing the entire complexion of their season. As crazy as that is to say, given everything that's happened up to this point. Now, do I think that's likely? No. That said, though, I'm keeping an open mind because, look, even with how dysfunctional this offense is and the fact that it's lost one of its better players in Jarred Kelenic, with this pitching staff, with this bullpen, with the rotation, when you have guys like Luis Castillo and George Kirby and Logan Gilbert, Bryce Miller, even with Brian Wu, likely getting shut down soon, you have a chance to win any game that you play in. You have a chance to compete in any game that you play in. So, yeah, could they go on a run? Absolutely. We have never denied the fact that they are incredibly talented, that they are more than talented enough to beat anyone. But again, everything that they've showed us up to this point says that they are just going to take 3 steps forward and not necessarily 4 steps back, just 3 steps back again, because it's just 500. There was that tweet that came out a few days ago where it's like the Mariners are 15-15 over their last 30. They're 4-4 over their last 8, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can fill in the rest. So yeah, I'm kind of transitioning my mindset towards 2024. How do you make the ball club better in 2024? What are some things that can happen the rest of the way this season that makes the ball club better in 2024 and gives me hope, right? I talked a little bit about this yesterday with Gino getting hot, because that means that, the Mariners aren't going to feel as pressed to do something about third base if he could finish the year out hot. Still, like I said yesterday, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't look to upgrade, but it doesn't make it as big of a need, as big of a deal to address, because you already have so many things that you have to work on with this team. And Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander right now, they have to do a really difficult balancing act that I do not envy them for, leading up to this deadline and at the deadline of, what are some pieces, especially when you're talking about pieces that are controlled past 2023, what are some pieces that we actually feel, are worth parting with? Like, what are some returns that we think is actually worth more to us in 2024 and 2025 than, say, Paul Sewald, right? Or yesterday, you and I, Colby, were talking off the air about how, I believe it was Dave Sims on the broadcast yesterday, said that Scott Service equated Teoscar Hernandez's clubhouse leadership to Nelson Cruz, which that should deaden any sort of talk about Teo being an issue in the clubhouse. Now, maybe that's just manager speak from Scott or whatever. There's, all those variables, obviously. But if that's actually the case, that's true, then maybe even though that Teo is still a rental and there's going to be undoubtedly some interest in him at the deadline, maybe it makes more sense for them to hang on to him and have those exclusive talks with him, because they're going to have the qualifying offer and all that. Maybe that's something, because again, you still need high level talent at the major league level right now. You still need guys that are proven, right? And Teo's obviously having a down year, but he's only 30 years old. And with the down year, maybe that makes him cheaper. Maybe that allows you to get him for fewer years than you thought you could have gotten him, trying to foresee the offseason a few months ago. Right. So that's the balancing act that they have to do here. That's what Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander have to keep in mind here. And again, like with the Sewald thing as well, like you need high leverage relievers. Obviously, bullpens and relievers are fickle more than any other position group out there. But still, if you're not getting the return that you think is worth it, why trade Paul Sewald? Why trade Justin Topo?
Right.
Why trade those guys? Right. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what this deadline ultimately looks like.
Yeah, because you don't want to like give anybody away. There's really no reason to give anybody away. But also, this is in theory a seller's market. So if you are going to sell some pieces, you should get more than you might think is possible. But you don't want to force it. And yet also, if you're the Mariners, though, you don't want to like standing pat is not an option at this deadline. You have to do something.
Yeah.
I think they want to both add and, buy and sell or like, I don't think they're just going to sell and be done, but
Jerry
I
said
think,
as much on the radio yesterday that it's
yeah.
going to be a buy and sell thing. He talked, specifically about adding players that help them in 2023 a little bit. I think that's exactly verbatim what he said, a little bit, and then 2024.
Right. And the players that help a little bit in 2023 are players who are going to, fill some obvious roles. And they're going to do the same in 2024. And that's why, like we talked about yesterday, a guy like Mark Hanna does make a lot of sense because he does help you a little bit this year. And he fills a pretty serious role and gives you Teoscar insurance in case Teo moves on in the offseason. So yeah, I think that's what he's talking about. Guys like that. I think it's just basically saying like, no, we're not going to trade for stars. Like that's just not, there's not that many to begin with anyways. But, so yeah, this team, this trade deadline, it's going to be interesting because they can't walk away empty handed, but there's really no reason for them to go, all in and go acquire Ohtani or go put out a serious offer for Juan Soto or anything like that. So they're probably just going to add around the edges, and and they might trade away a couple of guys who are, right around the edges of their roster too, to get some, guys like we're going to talk about here in just a second. So we'll see what they do. I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I don't think that most of the fan base will love the Mariners trade deadline, but I do think it's going to make a good amount of sense when you really sit down and you break it down and look at what they actually acquire versus what they gave up and how it impacts and how it helps them probably marginally in 2023, but really gives them a leg up heading into the winter to get ready for the 2024 season.
You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Again, you can catch the Mariners and the Blue Jays on the Mariners hometown broadcast tonight with Sirius XM. So yeah, let's talk about some guys here because again, you're painfully mediocre. You're 500. You're not going to be, as Jerry Dipoto put it yesterday, in the big fish market, right? You're not going to do another Luis Castillo trade. But he has more or less said they are going to look to buy something at the deadline. Don't know what. We don't know to what extent. But we've obviously talked about established big leaguers like Dylan Carlson and Lars Nootbaar, etc. But what about some guys that have little to no major league experience, but are MLB ready, right? There's a lot of guys in Baltimore right now. I mean, their farm system is just stacked. Their AAA team right now is stacked. There's guys like Jonathan Aranda, who got name dropped today by John Morosi as a potential trade candidate. There's some other guys. We've talked about Xavier Edwards from the Marlins, someone that's had a brief cup of coffee at the major league level, but is back in AAA. Dominic Fletcher is another guy like that over in Arizona. And obviously, this is something that the Mariners have done quite a bit. I mean, a good chunk of their roster right now, or guys that have been a big part of their roster in years past, have been really of this mold, right? Think about Mitch Haniger, Ty France, even JP Crawford, constantly being up and down in Philadelphia as a former top prospect. So, yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised if the Mariners have identified a handful of guys that kind of fit that mold that they would be interested in acquiring, especially if they're selling, to one of these buyers, if they're selling like a Paul Sewald to the Tampa Bay Rays specifically, or Tom Murphy on top of that, etc. So, is there anyone that comes to mind for you? I listed some of the names. I listed, obviously the Orioles guys and Aranda, Fletcher, etc. Who of that group or anyone else that stands out to you might be a
Austin Shenton.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I honestly don't know if he's even performing right now.
He is. I was actually looking at him the other day. I think he's got like a 150 WRC plus or something like that down in AA.
Nice. Well, you guys might remember I'm a big fan of Shenton. So, although, were we on the show when that happened? When that trade happened?
Yes.
Yeah, we were. We had just started.
Yeah.
I think it was right after the trade was made, actually. Yeah. So I was a big Austin Shenton fan when they traded him, so that would be fun. But no, I like the idea of Dominic Fletcher. There are a lot of people who seem to think that Arizona wouldn't trade Fletcher for like Paul Sewald, and I have to ask why, because they've sent him down for lesser players already. So I
Yeah.
guess it's because he's been good in like 25 games at the major league level. So that's a guy that I think makes a lot of sense. I think Xavier Edwards makes a lot of sense because essentially what the Mariners get with him, they get a guy who's, you know, a pretty good hitter in theory, not a lot of pop, and he's kind of may or may not be able to be an everyday second baseman. And that's kind of what you want. You want guys who you can plug into your lineup basically every day and just more or less try out, because if Xavier Edwards shows that he can be a legitimate like second baseman, that's one less expensive piece you have to go out and buy this winter. And Edwards is going to be controllable. He does some things well. He's a pretty good athlete. He steals a lot of bases. He's, you know, shown some pop this year, but it's not a huge part of his game. But if you can leave this, you know, this season with feeling good about your Edwards Caballero platoon at second base, or Edwards Moore, whatever, right?
Yeah.
You feel good about what you have at second base and you have it for a couple more years, you can focus elsewhere. And so that's what I think you're looking for. I think you're looking for guys who you can come in, you can give, you know, a good amount of playing time to for the rest of this year without completely crushing your playoff odds, because they have had success at the high minors or some in the majors. And you can kind of try these guys out and see what fits and what doesn't. And I think a guy like Edwards, a guy like Fletcher makes a lot of sense for this club right now. And I do think that both of those teams are going to be pretty interested in somebody like Paul Sewald or Justin Topa, maybe even Tom Murphy. So,
Right.
Or Teoscar Hernandez is a possibility for the right guys. So,
Yep.
Yeah, I do think that there are guys that the Mariners can get without touching their starting pitching assets, without trading, you know, like Gabriel Gonzalez or Michael Arroyo. I do think there are long-term pieces those guys could get. You just have to give up a little bit in the short term, which is, you know, going to be a tough sell for some people. But
and I like Rondo a lot. I've talked about him a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
the problem there is he's essentially Ty France. He's left-handed Ty France,
which is still better than right-handed Ty France, but you know,
sure. So I mean,
he's not
like,
good,
there's
guys. He's not good.
There's some pop there, but he's not a good defender, and he's slow as hell. So
Sure.
yeah, it's basically the Ty France profile. But he can hit. He can really hit, at least down in the minors. You know, he's come up a couple times at the major league level. I think he's played 32 games last year, 4 games this year so far, so 36 games, and it's not been good so far. So
one guy who kind of fits this model, but not really, because now he's a little bit more established in the big leagues. But I'll throw him out there anyways, just so people have another name to think about. Brent Rooker.
Yeah.
29, I think 28, 29, all-star for the A's, having a good year. Obviously he's cooled off like a lot of guys have after a really good April and May, but you know, fake it in left field, play first base. He's got good right-handed power. On base skills aren't great, but you know, that's a guy that I think could be of interest. And Oakland is known for taking bulk deals as well, so that might not cost a ton relative to his production. But yeah, I think there are guys like that. I would be pretty surprised if we didn't see a player who is maybe viewed by others as like a 4A guy. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Mariners get one of those guys at the deadline and give that guy some serious playing time, and then see if it's a, you know, possible solution to one of your problems in 2024.
So before we get out of here, again, I think it's important for us to be transparent about things that are going on with the show, etc. Obviously, we have talked ad nauseum about technical issues that we've dealt with, and that's really all it is, right? When we've had to do multiple takes of a show, when we've told you guys that we've had to do multiple takes of the show, it's not because, you know, we've messed up or there's internet issues. It's literally like, it's been the platform that we record on that has, I mean, just to be real about it, it just straight up deletes the recording mid-recording and kicks us out of the room. And that happened again today, twice. And we don't really have a reason for it. We've had Locked On look into it. They haven't come up with a good reason. So we don't really know what's going on with that. And the problem is, a lot of the time it wastes our time, right? And then we end up having the same conversation over and over and over again, which makes the content less interesting for you. And like, there's only, you know, we can only fake it to a certain degree with that. So we're desperately searching for a solution. I think maybe we've found one here. We're using a different account on the same platform. And so far, I mean, if you're watching this, right? So that it's worked so far. We'll see how that goes over, more recordings, but so far so good. So yeah, so again, apologies, like this is really the most important thing here is apologies for the show being delayed so much and for the inconsistencies and posting times, etc. But these are the issues that we deal with, right? And it's out of our hands. We've tried a bunch of things. I'm now on a wired connection. We don't have windows open, we don't have tabs open. We're doing everything that we can to not bog down our connections on our ends. And from everything that we can see, it's not a connection issue. It's not Colby's internet. It's not my internet. Like we'll have lag here and there, but that's naturally going to happen, especially with me being in Toronto and Colby being in Yakima, right? So again, I don't know really what the fix is. Hopefully what we've tried out today is the solution here and we won't have as many problems. But again, really, really sorry for the inconsistencies in posting and, our grumpy moods at times when we get on here after trying to record 3 to 4 times for the same show. So yeah. All right. That's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez. It's DANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok as well over at Locked On Mariners. That's one word, Locked On Mariners. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day and a beautiful baseball weekend, and we'll see you next time. Peace.